Welcome back to Radio Taiwan International. You're listening to Geek Out. What's your cup of tea, tickles your fancy, or floats your boat? Join us as we share passions from people in Taiwan and around the world. I'm your host, Michelle Chang, and today, again, we've got Helen and Kim back.
Whoop, whoop. Hey.
So,
very different energies.
But I love it. It's good to have different energies in here. Well, Kim, what are we geeking out about today?
Writing fiction.
Fictional writing. Tell us about it.
Well, I've been writing stories since I want to say in junior high, so like around 13, 14. Because before that, it was more me being, what do you call it? Like a social outcast sort, and just in my own head imagining things, imagining my own stories and stuff, right? But I would handwrite them in journals in high school, fanfic, Buffy the Vampire Slayer fanfic. That's where I got my start.
I think a lot of us start with fanfic.
Absolutely. It's where David Tennant got his start. He started writing fanfic, and then he got for Doctor Who, and then he got to play the Doctor.
That's amazing.
Yeah, what a legend.
Right.
And but as far as like original material, I never really did anything that original, so to speak. Most of my stuff tends to be inspired by or like in a universe, right? But now November's finished, but November is, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Nano?
But nano, well, some people say NaNoWriMo, some people say NaNoWriMo. Well, I understand why people say Rimo because writing, right? But that's just a personal preference. But anyway.
So what does it stand for?
So I don't know what it stands for. It is a national something, 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 writing something, something, something. But it basically is you start at the beginning of November. You have till the end of November to write 50,000 words on a novel. Basically, you can't start it before and you can't, finish. It's on the merit system, right? It's a challenge. Yeah. It's a self-imposed challenge. It was my first time actually making an effort this year to do it, and so I started writing a book about fairy tales, basically, of my personal favorite, The Little Mermaid. But I have a whole world I've been building for years, so that's been my sort of writing challenge. Yeah. But now it's over. I hit 10,000 words.
I mean, there's no requirement or some kind of, deadline or something.
Well, there is for Nano, but so I'm actually really since it was my first time ever trying it, and I was quite busy schedule wise and things, I'm actually really pleased. Yay. I hit that word count.
That's a lot of words.
It is a lot of words. And I also write a lot. So it all balances out.
It means National Novel Writing Month.
Wow.
Ding, 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 ding.
Thank you for
looking
looking
that up.
It
is so much shorter than I thought it was, but that's why people say Rimo, I think. I just don't like the way it sounds. I don't know. It's a personal thing.
I think the challenge is it's lovely as what it is, regardless of
I think it's a really cool concept, and it's been around for many, many years, and I've always heard of it. I tried it a couple of years ago with a friend of mine, but we got sidetracked and never got back to it, which is fine. But I think it's a really cool idea to get people writing and being creative. There's no restriction on what you write, what genre.
As long as you're writing.
And for me, I like fiction just because reality bites. And
that's actually something that a lot of us, I'm just going to lump us into category nerds, have in common. Maybe especially this generation grew up as social outcasts. Today, I'm sorry, but we broke down those barriers for you young kids
what
today.
Can I say? Except you're welcome.
The bullying I used to get at school for being a reader
was just insane.
And particularly because not only did I read, but because I read high fantasy in high school starting from the age of 11.
Yeah.
My experience is very different to yours. I don't write very often because I grew up horribly dyslexic. But if not for the fact that someone had handed me some high fantasy adult level books.
Right. So like Tolkien?
Thankfully, no, because the names in that to this day I can't read Tolkien.
That's pretty chewy.
No, it was, I always say his name wrong, David Gemmell, Raymond Feist or Raymond Fest.
I'm not sure.
It's the Magician series.
Oh, yes, I know that.
The Magician series, The Magician was one of the first books that I was given at the age of 11 by a family friend. Now, bearing in mind that until that age, I had never been able to read.
Right.
I was reading at I'm not sure in American grades, like a 7-year-old level at the age of 12, 13. So he gave me The Magician. That is the reason I can read. Because I sat with those books.
It caught your interest.
It was so interesting. I sat with those books with a dictionary so that I could understand them.
Yeah.
And if not for that, But then because I was doing that, you would get bullied for it because
Yep.
it was you were a weirdo and a freak and a geek.
Right. It's
Yeah.
and yeah, all of us people who were outcasted then found ourselves with a lot of
Phenomenal
time.
cosmic power.
But without that, without being popular and being in sports teams and all that. I mean, we wound up going to the library and finding books, and then some of us found the joy in writing as well, because
Like me.
these fantasy worlds, fiction worlds are amazing, and you get lost in them. They're great, of course, distraction, but enrichment. And as Helen says, they're encouragement to in your case, learn to read and better yourself. So it's also lovely. The reason why my second choice of major, I guess, was creative writing is because you try to then produce your own wonderful fantasy worlds.
Yep.
Right. So
That's what I'm doing.
Yay.
World building for years.
So tell me about the world building process that you go through. Everyone's a little bit different. But
Sure.
Tell me about yours.
I don't know that I'm a good person to ask. Because as we've discussed before, I've got ADHD, and so
That's why it's interesting to learn about.
Is it? I don't.
Yeah, do it, please.
Well, like for me, I built a general world first, and then I decide how far into that world I am, and then I have to zoom in on where I'm going to start the story. Like for this one in particular, it's a world that I've built that's every city, so to speak, or kingdom is a fairy tale place from an actual fairy tale.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So, like, I go down rabbit holes with it, basically. So, like, for since I'm focusing on the Little Mermaid, I went down a very Danish rabbit hole for names and different cultural anecdotes and stuff that I put in as Easter eggs, so to speak, right? Like one of the surnames is the city that Hans Christian Andersen is from. Like that, I just like to do little nods like that. So I get down rabbit holes of names, and then I get down rabbit holes of like generational trees, and I want to say that it's a little bit similar to Tolkien's process, because he was also like sticky notes here and sticky notes there, and I need to go back to that. But there's so much in building a world, and I'm also on the autistic spectrum, right? The autism spectrum. So I have a lot of rules, and I have to make those rules myself, which is really weird. But then like that's it. I have to follow those rules. So like if I find something that might deviate from it, I have to puzzle that out. So explaining my process is a process itself, because I don't really have one.
I mean, it's interesting though. So
Is
you
it?
start
Did that
with
make
the
any sense?
Yeah, it did. So you start with the overall world
Yes.
first, the big picture, but then you rabbit hole down into specific
Yes.
locations.
Yes.
And very specific details about certain stories
Yes.
that happen in places.
Yes, and then I have to build around the history there and what happened that's adjacent to that, and then so it's kind of going like zooming in and out constantly.
I'm going to say there's generally two schools of method for plotting out a story. Is one, you go wide angle and then you zoom in slowly, and then the other method is the opposite.
Chaos.
Chaos. No, I mean, it's the George R.R. Martin situation where he concentrates very, very intensely on the characters, and then from there the characters dictate the story rather than the world dictating what the characters do.
See, I don't. So it's like for me, I have to have a very not rigid but a structured world for my characters to play in, and so for me, building the story itself is less structured itself because I want the characters to do their own thing.
Essentially, you don't want to have the problem that a lot of books have of they tell you the rules at the start,
Yep.
and then 4 chapters in, because it's inconvenient for their protagonist, they instantly forget all the rules.
Yeah, I hate that. I hate that nonsense.
Yeah, also drives me nuts. It's like, if you say you're a vampire, can't go out in the daylight, then why are they in the daylight?
Yeah.
Just to be sparkly. I don't know.
Sparkles.
Okay,
So
so
we're
we're
pretty light on the sparkles,
right,
definitely.
we're gonna not poop on certain franchises.
No, I mean, because like I'm of the opinion too with stuff like that. Like I may have a problem with it, but it's like people. There's something out there for everyone, so it's not bad. It's just bad to you. It's a matter of perspective, right?
Absolutely.
So,
Everybody's got the
just
different-
as a what do you call like a
Preferences.
disclaimer here. Like
To be fair, if I go in direct daylight, I do shine. I am very, very pale.
sparkly.
Irish.
I love it. Well, okay. So where are you in your story after 10,000 words?
I stopped counting the chapters because they are I have them separated by chapters, but I'm also at a point where, like, because of the way my brain works, I'll get to a certain point and I'm like, wait, I need to work out what happened before. And so I have to go write what happened in the past, or I have to map it out a little bit. I do little sticky notes. It's a nightmare. Yes.
How many of the 10,000 words are just research for your...
I did not
world
count any of
building?
those.
Really?
Yeah,
Oh,
all
good
the
job.
10,000 words are specifically from the story itself with some bits of an outline of a flashback chapter.
Right. But I this is kind of why I want you to tell your process, because everyone's process is different.
Yes.
And it's nice to hear that even if you can't write in a
Linear fashion?
Yeah, exactly. Like a linear, like point A to Z in exact order fashion, that doesn't mean that you can't write.
For me, like, writing in a linear fashion doesn't make any sense, which is odd since I am very much a rules person. So you would, I guess people would think that way.
You're not great with time.
Yeah, I'm not great with time, but like that's more like a management problem. But like in the sense of life itself is also very reflective. And so I feel like when you're writing a story, if you get too ensconced in a certain point, then you're going to forget either what was going to happen or why where you're at is happening. So that's why when I get to a certain point, like where she, like the mermaid is making friends, why is she at this point in her personality? What happened before?
Exactly. Then you have to, I guess, elaborate on what happened
Yes.
before. So
And maybe it's not something that will be in the story at the end, but for me, I need to know for future referencing purposes, as if anybody's ever going to read this. I'm too shy to let anybody read anything.
I do want to read it. You've given me a little clip of
I
it.
did. I thought it was garbage. But that's how I am. Like, and I think most people that enjoy writing and write either as a living or for fun
Are self-conscious.
very self-conscious, and you are your own worst critic.
I think talking creatively in that, though, it's better to become detached. So sometimes for anybody starting out in any creative field, learning to separate yourself.
You have to, for sure. Like, I agree, because I found, because like I said, I've been working on this world for many, many years. And I went back before Nano started in preparation of it, and I found my timeline that I'd started, and I was reading like the history of my world, and I was like, oh, this is really interesting. I wonder what happens next, because I had no memory of writing it, and I was really pleased with the ideas that I'd come up with.
Which is a benefit of having zero object permanence.
Exactly. It helps your writing confidence. Sort of.
Talking, yeah. I also, although my focus wasn't writing, I've worked in, prior to coming to Taiwan, my degree and everything else was in fine art as well.
Interesting.
So whenever I say detach yourself, it's like if you're writing and you think what you've written is trash, that might be a valid criticism, but sometimes put it away.
And come back later.
Come back a week, a month later.
Yes.
And then read it with a very different eye.
I do that, yes.
Yeah, I think that's something that really helps. Typically, I think for writers, that might work better. For visual artists, very often you come back and go, yep, no, that was terrible. Let's start again. But you also see the skills development, and I think it's really important to go back and look at old work to understand your mistakes and to see how skills can be developed.
This is a problem I've always had, and something I've corrected with doing this. So like I print out parts of it, set it aside, and I'm like, I'm going to look at this in a week, and I do edits and go from there. And it does help a lot.
Another thing that's also really helped me is applying the Donald Trump rules that I've made for myself.
Please explain the Donald Trump
I'm concerned.
If someone as unique as him can be in his position, the worst thing you can do is like not try.
Oh yeah.
If you try, you are still going to be better than that. And you can pick that, not necessarily with him as an example. He's just a very easily
it's
explainable example. But like, if that, like, shoot for the lowest bar, because 50% of us are better than average.
Yes.
Even if you are the most average writer, the most average of any creative, you're still better than 50% of the people. And a lot of those people are paid to do that for a job.
Yes.
It's true.
I'm trying not to name
Name
authors.
names, of course.
But you can probably think of a book you've read where you have thought, I can do better than this. You have definitely seen photographs or paintings where you're like, my kid could do a better job than this.
Yeah.
Just try, because you can only get better.
Yeah. That's a
Absolutely.
philosophy I share for sure.
Yeah.
And some very untalented people get paid a lot of money to do
Yeah.
these things. You're probably more talented than them.
I wish. That's a self-confidence problem I have. And a lot of writers do struggle with that, right? But
Yeah.
it is important to remember that, like I said, something is interesting to somebody out there.
Yes.
Absolutely. There is in fiction something for everyone.
Exactly.
And it's like I said, a lot of people get started in fan fiction, and it's not like you have to have a completely original idea to
Nope.
get started writing if you are interested in starting this
Especially
hobby.
not in fan fiction.
Definitely not.
actually
Definitely.
that's literally the opposite to what you are doing.
Yes. I mean, what do they say? The sincerest form of flattery is imitation. or something
Imitation is the most sincerest form of flattery. Most
Thank you.
sincere form of
like-
flattery.
Thank you. Right.
And
So if something inspires you to start your own version of said story, or using the characters that you love from someone else's creation, I do think that's a wonderful thing to start the first domino in a chain of a.
That is something that happens in most works of fiction. Like Mary Higgins Clark talks about how anybody that's crossed her in her life ends up getting killed in her books. Like, there's a therapy to it. Not just in murdering it, right? Murdering it, but murdering people. But just like because that's what this story for me that I'm writing now is about for me, because I just lost a friendship that I had for many years, and I want it to be kind of a similar journey for this character so that I can work out for myself how to deal with what I've lost.
Self-reflection,
Yes.
and catharsis.
And hopefully, maybe if I ever do let other people read it one day, it would help someone else too.
Right.
there's
That-
also there's nothing, I cannot remember the exact quote off the top of my head, but that every story is not original. Like, all of the stories have already been
Correct.
told. You're not going
Everything-
to write. Like, there's so few.
No. And I'm not worried about originality because everything is inspired by something. I love Doctor Who. Doctor Who is 100% like Sherlock Holmes in space. And I love Sherlock Holmes, right? So to restrict yourself in any fashion is absurd. For me, who loves rules, I can actually look at writing and say that there are no rules.
Yes.
They're only the rules that you make for yourself.
Yeah.
There's also that quote that Dante's Inferno
boy.
is just fanfic of the Bible.
It is. It's one of my all-time favorite fan fictions.
Yeah.
I've never heard that before. That's
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it
fantastic.
absolutely is.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Hanging out with his
100%.
bestie in hell, like sure, yeah, Virgil. That's okay to say, right?
Yes, you can
Okay.
say hell
Okay, I
because
thought so.
we are referring to hell
Yes, as
as an
it's-
actual place.
Yes.
I mean, wow, I never thought about it. That
Yeah, it really does apply though.
But
And
yes.
if you even Shakespeare did it too. Romeo and Juliet is a retelling or a fanfic of Tristan and Isolde.
It is indeed, and there's a lot of most of those are considered like the blueprints, right? Like Tristan and Isolde, Beowulf, so many stories, and largely thanks to Tolkien, which a lot of people don't know because he did a really superb translation of it. But stories come from something, and to look at them as like this is a poor imitation of X, Y, and Z is not just ignorant, but obtuse. It's obtuse.
narrow-minded.
Yeah, obtuse and narrow-minded and ignorant and all of those things all rolled into one, because either you like it or you don't. If you don't like it, move on,
Exactly. It's not your cup of tea. Go pour yourself another.
right? And I saw something on Instagram about like Bookstagram or whatever, where people were saying like, if you read a book and you didn't like it, then just don't critique it. Mm-hmm. Because why would you want to tear somebody down? Hold on, I see that face. I see that face, and like, because everybody starts somewhere, everybody writes for something, for whatever their reason. And I, as someone who has been historically discouraged by people above her in fields that I've enjoyed, like art and writing and etc., if you are a writer and you've published and somebody's on there like trash talking you, that can be really discouraging for some people. And so you do more by putting good out there rather than anything negative. Like, so just don't go on there like this book was garbage just because I think it was garbage. They can't write, they can't do blah, 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 blah. No, just don't do it.
I think there's also the difference between constructive criticism
Exactly.
versus
Yes.
just ripping shreds for the
Exactly.
sake.
Yeah, which is what like
Yeah.
Bookstagram is like trying to, I think, push from what I've just recently been a part of it because of
Yeah.
the stories that I'm reading
But
now.
as we know, internet trolls.
are the
Well, that
worst.
So right for the blooming writer, the person who wants to take the first few steps into it's a fantastic hobby and maybe profession. What will we say to them?
Keep trying.
Yeah, keep trying.
Don't stop.
Don't be afraid.
Probably just start as opposed to, because literally sitting down, open a Word document
And
or
start writing.
Google Docs,
If you like analog, take out some
Like
paper.
me, I have so many
Right.
journals.
just write what comes out of your head.
Yeah.
Everybody's process is so different.
Yeah.
So,
Then put it away, come back to it a week later. If it isn't utter trash, then
To you, yeah.
keep
yeah,
going.
then you've maybe got something.
Yeah, you can even if it is utter, in your opinion, utter trash, then you can rework the ideas
Yeah.
and possibly evolve it.
Because very often the worst ideas will lead you to a good idea. So it's
All
better
roads
to get
lead
those
to
out.
somewhere.
Right, and I think one of humanity's greatest gifts is the ability to tell stories.
Yeah.
Concur.
Concur. Well, thanks for joining me again today.
No problem.
I don't know where my voice went.
It was adorable. And thank you, listeners, for tuning into Radio Taiwan International. I'm Michelle Chang, and we'll be back next Thursday with another episode of Geek Out.